everybody! So we've been studying a lot about the different types of sentences and when to use them and why to use them and all that good stuff. Well, there's one more we need to learn about. But first, let's backtrack a little bit. An easy way to remember all the sentence types is thinking about it as a family. First thing we learned about a simple sentence. That's represented by this girl here. You know, the independent type. She moved off to New York all by herself. She can totally stand alone. She's got her own job. She's got her own life. And that is represented by one independent clause. So a simple sentence is like one independent adult. Now, after she'd been living in New York for a while, living the high life, she decided to get married. When she did, they got hooked together by one of the fanboys, or every now and then a semicolon. They were two independent clauses, a compound sentence as two independent adults joined together in marriage. So that's compound. So simple is when she was living the good life in New York City by herself. Compound is when she got married to someone else who was independent. Two independent clauses. Complex, as we've learned, is one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. So first of all, we had unfortunately, things didn't quite work out for our happy couple. So what we're left with is Dad. But there is a dependent with him, a dependent child. So it's one independent adult and one or more dependent children. He's got his hands full. This guy's just got one, but he might have more than one. So his life is very complex. Now, but once you've got a married couple with two or more children or even just one child, you've got a compound complex sentence. Their problems haven't just compounded, they're now also complex. Now the important difference is you have to have two independent clauses. See, there's our man and our woman, two independent people, and one or more dependent. It could just be one child or it could be more than one. For example, since I enjoy language arts, I like reading, that's an independent clause, and I love grammar. Remember that independent clauses can completely stand alone. So in this case, a compound complex sentence is going to have one dependent clause, since I enjoy language arts, one independent clause, I like reading, and another independent clause, I love grammar. Remember, you can tell that the independent clauses are joined together because I've got a comma and a fanboys. So this is just a little chart to help you keep them all straight. So to recap, an independent clause, a simple sentence, is like one independent woman living by herself in New York City. It can stand alone. A compound sentence, the problems get compounded, but we've got two independent people who have been joined together in holy matrimony by one of the fanboys, or a semicolon, and that's a compound sentence. Their problems are getting compound. Things get a little complex after they got divorced, and we've got one independent person and one dependent person, or more than one dependent person. That's when things are complex. And then things get really tricky when it's compound complex. Two independent clauses and one or more dependent clauses. Good luck! So here's a little practice for you to try to keep them all straight, because it can get a little tricky trying to figure out which ones are complex, which ones are compound, and which ones are compound complex. So here's a few ideas to help you. Just like when we're trying to determine whether it's complex or compound, we can look for arubious words. We can look for relative pronouns, you know, the Who sisters, their witchy cousin and lonely old that. And we can look for fanboys. That will help us determine what kind of sentences we're looking at. So if you start by looking at the first sentence, let's see if there are any Awubis words. I see one. If is an Awubis word. So if you circle it, that will help you know that it starts, what kind of clause? Dependent. So I'm going to underline my dependent clauses. Then let's see what's left. What's left is try some of Umber's. Wow, that doesn't seem like it has a subject, but actually it does. It's the understood you. So that would be an independent clause. I'm going to label it with an I. For the next sentence, let's take a look to see if there are any Awubis words. I see one. Whenever. Now I'm going to take a look to see if there are any of the relative pronouns. I don't see any relative pronouns. Now I need to check to see if there are any commas and fanboys. I do see one of the fanboys and a comma, so I'm going to circle it. Now, I want to start with dependent clauses, which you know start with Awubis words or relative pronouns. So I'm going to double underline those. So I think, since whenever is my starter word, whenever you have a problem, that's going to be a dependent clause. Started with the starter word and ended, kind of has a feeling of an ending. So I'm going to underline that 2 times. Now let's see what I have left. In the first part I have, you can talk to me. I think that could stand alone. So to me, that looks like an independent clause. I'm going to underline that in red, except it's not cooperating with me. There we go. And I'm going to mark it with an I. My eyes are a little wonky because it's hard to do on an iPad. The rest I have left of the sentence is, you can talk to your mom. I think that also could stand alone, so I'm going to underline that in red and label it independent clauses. If we went back to our families and I had 2 independent people who could stand alone, and 1 dependent person, what kind of clause do you think I have? That's right. Compound complex. Oh, and I forgot to mark the first one. It's complex. On the third one, I'm going to look first for any starter words, Awubis, fanboys, or relative pronouns. I don't see any relative pronouns. I don't see any Awubis words, but I do see a fanboys, so I'm going to circle it. Does the fanboys have a comma with it? Yes, it does. So now I need to check to see if both sides of that fanboy could stand alone. So my first part says, did you really live in New Delhi? That can definitely stand alone, so I'm going to underline it. Are you just kidding? Can that stand alone? Yes. So I have 2 independent clauses joined with the fanboys. So what kind of sentence do I have? Drum roll, please. Compound. My third sentence. You guessed it, we're going to look for Awubis words first. So I found one, after. So that tells me I'm going to have a dependent clause. I'm going to double underline that. And then I'm going to see what I have left. You can go to baggage claim. Well, can that stand alone? Yes. So I'm going to underline it and label it independent. So if I've got one independent and one dependent, if I was looking at my family's chart, I'm going to have a complex sentence. And last but not least, let me look for any starter words or fanboys. On number 5, I do see a starter word, and I woo this word, since. Do I see any other awubis words? Well, until is a woobus word, but I don't see a subject and a verb after that, so I don't think that's a clause. But I do see a fanboys. So first I'm going to underline any of the dependent clauses. So my dependent clause is since the daylight saving time started. I'm going to double underline that. And then let me see what else I've got. The sky doesn't get dark until late. Could that stand alone? Yes, so it's an independent clause. Now I've got a fanboys, so that generally tells me I'm going to have another independent clause. Let's check. That just doesn't seem right to me. Can that stand alone? Yes, so that's another independent clause. So if I have 2 independent clauses and 1 dependent clause, what kind of sentence do I have? You got it. Compound complex. All right. Give it all a try. See what you think. Try out your homework and see what you can come up with. See if this gives you any help. Remember, feel free to rewind, start again, pause on different parts to help you understand. See you tomorrow.